So step 9. I got an email this week actually from one of our congregants who said, why are all the steps in the past tense? And so our step 9, made direct amends to such people whenever possible, except when to do so would injure them or others. And they're done in the past, I think, in the same way that many of the Psalms are written as if it's already happened, because it helps us to say, if we believe that it has happened, then we believe it will happen. So we make ourselves go on and say, this is possible. So made direct amends. It's good to remember, as someone said at our book study on Friday, the 12-step program was written for alcoholics, for people who would not look at doing any kind of program without having hit bottom. And by the time you've hit bottom, you've likely caused a lot of damage on the way down. You may not feel like you have a lot to repent of in your life. Might not feel like a step that connects with you. On the other hand, you may take credit for more than your share of repenting. I remember on my first pastoral charge, we had an ecumenical Good Friday service where the Baptist minister's wife lamented that she was the worst of all sinners. And I thought, honey, the only person you're worse than is, like, what, Mickey Mouse? It was, she was the sweetest gal. I don't think so. But you don't have to be an alcoholic to make mistakes, as we know, to do harm, either by deeds done or by deeds left undone. So step 9 talks about having the wisdom or the skillful means to know when and how to make amends, and when to not unearth every damn detail, which then turns a need for healing into a gossip fest. Last night I watched the movie The Company You Keep. I saw a few others that were there. Fabulous movie, and as I was thinking this morning, I thought, that movie is about step 9. So if you have a chance to watch it, starring Robert Redford and Susan Sarandon and a number of others, do take a look. It's step 9 in spades. From the book that we've been studying, Breathing Underwater, Richard Rohr says, just because something is factually true does not mean everyone can handle it or even needs to handle it or has a right to the information. You need to pray and discern what the other needs to hear and also has a right to hear. What people want to hear in salacious and gossipy detail has now been fed by our media-saturated society, and our wanting to know becomes a right to know. Gossip is not a right, but a major obstacle to human love and spiritual wisdom. Paul lists it equally with the much more grievous hot sins, and you can find those in Romans chapter 1, 29 to 31. And yet most of it find it rather easy to gossip. Doesn't seem like such a bad thing. He goes on to say, our supposed right to know every truth about our neighbor too often feeds those with pre-existing malice, biases, or mental imbalance, and leads to spin, distortion, and misinterpretation of supposed facts. The whole issue of gossiping was addressed at the United Church General Council meeting almost a year ago. Sadly, we're not doing so well as a society or a church at confronting gossiping in ourselves and in others. But I do have hope. I do have hope because brave people throughout history and within the church have known when the time is right to make amends, how much truth to tell, and they have, even with fear and trembling, brought healing to birth that some thought would never happen. I want to share one of those stories with you today. And this comes from, this is a story by Kathy Hogman. It is her story, and she shared a part of it at our presbytery in February. Kathy writes, 1995, Port Alberni. Never in my wildest dreams did I ever think I would be in a position like I found myself in Port Alberni. I arrived fresh from a small rural pastoral charge in Saskatchewan to the eye of a hurricane. Just before I arrived that summer, Arthur Plint was convicted of sexual assault on children at the Alberni Residential School, the Alberni Indian Residential School. On the advice of its lawyers, the United Church of Canada, who administered the school, refused to acknowledge responsibility for the tragedy. As the lawsuits mounted, they feared the United Church may be sued out of existence. I remember those uncomfortable days. Kathy writes, I found myself in a state of shock. I had been blissfully unaware of residential schools and their impact on First Nations throughout Western Canada. I did not know the United Church had been involved in any of them. Now I had a steep learning curve in front of me. Some of the members of my congregation had worked at the school. Some had worked at other Indian residential schools, and some had attended the school. We came together to pool our knowledge and resources. We invited people to tell their stories. We spent a year in study and prayer. Our sense of shock and denial led to a growing realization that something had to be done. Someone had to face the pain, the anger, and the tragedy of Indian residential schools. Someone had to do something. Children stolen from their families and communities as young as 5 years old. Language destroyed, spirituality demonized, culture shattered, lack of food and medical care standard. This is horrible enough, but then to face physical and sexual abuse on top of that, in a United Church-run school, someone had to do something. It didn't take long to realize that we were the someone, and the something was to apologize. Everything we knew as Christians went into that apology. Our understanding of God, sin and grace, forgiveness and reconciliation, death and resurrection were woven into the words and the spirit of the apology. We knew that it would not make everything better. We knew it would not wipe out 150 years of suffering. And we knew we had to do this, that God was calling us to do this. In May of 1997, we stood in the gym of the former residential school on Mission Road and presented an apology from our congregation to over 600 members of the Nuchalith Nations. It was the most powerful spiritual experience of my life. An extraordinary moment. It was a moment of turning toward one another with God as witness. It was a beginning. We are still beginning, still finding ways to turn toward one another. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission offers us ways of beginning. There we can bear witness to the courage and love of God by our presence, by being Christ for our sisters and brothers in pain. And we continue the beginning of healing, reconciliation, of birthing a new relationship between peoples. And Kathy urges us to attend the Truth and Reconciliation hearings. We have that opportunity. For Kamloops Okanagan Presbytery, the hearing is in Kamloops at the Kamloops in Kamloops, BC, or known as Moccasin Square Gardens, May 28th and 29th, from 8 to 4 p.m., 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. each day. Come and bear witness. Kathy Hogman, Kamloops Okanagan Presbytery. This coming Tuesday, I am going to bear witness. I go to listen and to be willing to apologize if necessary on behalf of my church. Why should I? I wasn't an abuser in residential schools. I didn't even know about the schools until the late 1990s. I'm looking forward to this opportunity with about as much enthusiasm as one looks forward to a root canal. But I will go. I will go because I believe. In fact, I know from my own experience that an apology, even if not from the person who has harmed you, validates your experience rather than minimizing it, denying it, justifying it, excusing it. Those things do not promote healing. Much of Jesus' ministry was about healing. In fact, that's the main thing. About touching people, looking at them intently, listening to them deeply, and offering God's boundless healing love. When someone listens to your pain, to your anger, and applies redemptive listening, listens with intent, with love. When someone looks at you in the eye and says from the heart, I am so sorry that this has happened to you. It's not your fault. You didn't deserve it. It was not right and it will never be right. Those words are a validation of who you are, a child of God. Strangely but truly, when your grief is validated, it's much easier to let go of it. And that's the grace of God. It's the grace of God. And as Anna taught me, when words are hard to say, maybe you can sing them. How could anyone ever tell you you are anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you are less than whole? How could anyone fail to notice that your loving is a miracle? How deeply you're connected to my soul. How could anyone ever tell you you are anything less than beautiful? How could anyone ever tell you you are less